Hello, welcome back.
Hello.
Good to see you all. Good to see you, Ting. Week 7. Oh, it's going by so quick now. Of the Sewing Bee 90's week. How you doing, Ting?
Yeah, not too bad. It just made me feel incredibly old to be doing a historical week.
Of the 90's. Only
Well,
feels
30 odd years ago now, isn't it?
only feels like a couple of weeks ago. But before we go any further, you'll have noticed I'm in black, and I'm just going to do. I'm just going to do something as well with the clever special effects. I'm just going to click my fingers to represent. There we go. In
Oh.
official mourning.
Well, as I'm sure we'll find out later for people who
Yeah.
may not have seen the show.
So just to start us off. But anyway, let's go straight into the comments before we get to our special guest who joins us this episode. Some comments that have come up from last week. So many wonderful comments. And I know we've said this before, Ting, haven't we? But the detail of some of the comments is always amazes me. But always how the commenters always get the right level of analytics with decency to the sewers out there.
Oh, absolutely. But I do get a little frustrated that you never seem to choose many of the comments that support me.
Well, that might all change because remember the brooch for Mia's dress.
That
So
did not go down well.
Rachel says she other than liking Tony's dress and saying I'm still throwing a slipper at the end of each episode when they show too much of next week's makes. I know many of you agree about that, but she says sorry Stuart, but the red brooch not one of your best. Which you literally poo-pooed at as I was saying it. But I did find someone who did like it. Thank you, Margaret. There you go. Loved the red brooch idea. So some people in my camp. This made me laugh, Ting. Elise, I am unable to comment this week as my husband wants a dragon dressing gown and I need to go and lie down in a dark room.
Well, and I think this just, kind of backs up what we said about last week's episode, because it seemed like proper sewing that you'd want to have a go at yourself. You're not telling me that we all didn't sit there going, well, I'm sure I could knock up a dragon dressing gown if I really wanted one. And I've had 2 people ask me to make them one.
Oh, really? And what was your answer? Politely?
No.
And remember we did a shout out. I saw this lovely knit that Vicky was wearing, and yes, didn't take long for the YouTube community to come back. Vicky was wearing the Love Note. It is a pattern by Tin Can Knits, and Visit with Nana and Papa, also known as Valerie, has made 7 of them. So that's going to go on my list to do at the shop. But something that did make me giggle, which will make you laugh. Oh, no, not that one. This one. Joy of Yarn with Kiwi James says, Stuart, calling Ting's fashion label Ting is just too down market. It needs to be more dramatic. Perhaps the House of Ting. It gets better, featuring a designer collection of slippers or throwable
Absolutely.
slippers. And then it just gets even better because we have Michaela, beg your pardon, I read that too quick, saying King Ting's flingable things. Try saying that quickly. So that was great.
Once you've had a drink.
But to finish off, Coco Knits made a look at this. See what I was saying about detailed comments? Saying thanks for another great Unpicked. Well, thank you, Coco Knits. I threw a slipper at the transformation challenge. But she goes on to say in the made to measure, Fauve was let down by the pattern she used, Simplicity S8850. She goes, I've made it for my daughter and it's a disaster. With no fastenings, either you go way too big so they can get it on, or you go for the right fit and they can't get into it. The dress I made for my daughter only fit her for about 2 weeks. So interesting, isn't it? You've got to choose the right pattern. But then it just come down to, well, they did have time to practice, didn't they?
Well, I was going to say, we were reminded again this week that they've had time to practice. So there is an element of, you would have thought she would have made it and said, oh, I need to downsize it or whatever to
Make
try and
those
compensate
adjustments.
for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, there we are. Thank you very much for your comments. Always get onto them, read them. I was on top form this week and replied to every single one. Most of them had a nice conversation with, or a little start. But yes, you've been waiting for it this week. Something different. A special guest. We've had special guests in the past, and they've been previous sewing bee people. But we thought this year, let's get somebody that really knows what they're talking about, who can challenge us. So let's go to it. Let's welcome in Ryan Rix. Hello, Ryan.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's great to have a professional on board with us. Us two armchair sewers. But for someone who's gone through some sort of academia, it would be lovely to have your opinions on fashion and fashion design. Ryan, before we go any further, just give the viewers, the YouTube viewers out there, just a minute or so about you and what you do.
Okay, so I'm a fashion designer and creator based in Wales. I create custom bespoke pieces for people and private clients. I also have a bit of a background in some theatre work, some costume that I've done, as well as just like the sewing bee. I've been asked a lot would I ever go on there, but like you said, because I've got a background in like academic qualifications, unfortunately I wouldn't be able to apply unless it was in about 15 years.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people call me a professional. I don't see myself as that, but maybe that's just me. But yeah, so I've just mainly got my background is in women's wear, which is perfect for the sewing bee because it does seem to be mainly tailored towards women. Which is really interesting considering how many men sewers there actually are. That don't sew for just women; they sew for themselves or other men. But yeah, that's what my background is pretty much in.
Lovely. And don't forget all your YouTube stuff that you do as well.
Yeah, my content creation as well here on YouTube. I do some tutorials and a lot of teaching as well. I like to teach on YouTube and teach people how to sew or make patterns, which I find really fun and I find it really enjoyable.
And actually, viewers, that's how I found Ryan. The wonders of the YouTube algorithm. You may watch some tutorial, and then at the end, it's like it gives you a suggestion of what's coming up next, what to look at. Or on the right-hand side, it's a bit like the Instagram algorithm or the TikTok algorithm. It works out what you're watching and suggests content. And Ryan appeared on mine, watched him, and then I think I've been following you for a year now on YouTube, and then obviously gone across platform to see your stuff on Instagram. And that is the beauty of social media, isn't it? That you can find content that you're interested in and engage with that and just see it develop. And that's what you did. So take a look, viewers, at Ryan on YouTube and Instagram. I'll put all the details in the description box below, so you can click on the links and go straight to Ryan and watch his work develop. Well, as I said, we were going to have you on last week, but it made sense to Kids Week, to have you on this week, perfect week for this idea of the 90s fashion supermodel. Though, yes, we just did have a giggle, didn't we, Ting, about how old Ryan actually is.
Ryan is not qualified to talk about the 90s. He didn't even saw them in any way, shape, or form.
No.
But I'm sure women's designer dresses will be perfect for you.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I can't wait to talk to you about the scuba thing from Tony Beanie too and see your thoughts on that. But let's go straight into it.
I would quite like his opinion, and we'll do this after the show, on what he thought of Gina G's 1995 performance at Eurovision in her silver micro mini, but we'll save that for later.
Oh, brilliant. Right, let's go into it then. Let's see who we've got left. 6 down, 6 left to go. So there we have it. Asma, Lauren, Mia, Lizzie, Tony Beanie, as he's now affectionately called. So we could spot him from the other Tony, even though the other Tony's gone. It's still Tony Beanie. And Vicky. Right, going to put you on the spot, Ryan. Do you have a top favourite or a top 3? I've got my pen ready to draw.
Yeah, my top favourite is definitely Asma.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'd say my top 3 is Asma, Mia,
Right.
and from this week, Vicky. It was Tony R, but this week Vicky really, for the first time, I feel in this series, she's really proved her skill.
Absolutely.
So I was really happy to see that, to be honest, because I feel like we haven't got to know her yet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Very, very valid point. Whilst the show was going on, normally me and Ting have a little text at the 9-minute mark, don't we, to say who's going. And terribly, even though we didn't want, well, I didn't want to. I think you said Vicky straight away, didn't you? And I then said, oh, it could be Mia. How you think from just what you've seen over the weeks, is it time for her to go? And I think you're right, Ryan. That episode has totally changed that. What did you think of that, Ting, about that remark?
Yeah, I think, not to, but Vicky has had a few moments over the last few weeks, and I think, if you had not watched the episode, which is where we were at the start, going, who is it likely to be? And it was like, well, she didn't have a very good couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But absolutely knocked it out of the park with her made to measure. Well, with her other bits as well, but her made to measure especially. And it just goes to show, you get the right garment in the right week at the right time, and that will take you through.
Absolutely. And as you rightly say, Ryan, I felt she came out a lot more. She had a bit more airtime. And I know that's down to the edit. There's only 6 sewers now, so they're all going to be talking a lot more to Sarah, aren't they? And perhaps there's more space for things. And sometimes how a sewer comes across isn't down to the sewer at all, is it? It's down to the edit of just where the editor puts them. Ting, has your favourites changed at all, or are they still pretty much the same?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, I think Asma is good. There's a part of my heart that wants Tony R to make it to the final, and to be fair, he's had a good couple of weeks. But now Vicky has, come up the rear, so to speak, dark horse. I don't know anymore. So I think I don't know if I think it might have been said in the judging towards the end, especially in this episode anyway. Is it was anyone's to win and anyone's to lose. They're all very much. I mean, Asma is very good, but she finally produced something outstanding in the made to measure, and finally got her prize, so to speak. But they're all, very much of a muchness. It's not like you're sitting here going, well, there's definitely 2 people who will, easily make it into the final. This week, and the emergence of Vicky just goes to show that it's still anyone's game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that idea of it's just down to someone having a bad week then, because they're all very competent. You could all quite clearly see them in the final.
You can tell yourself that this week if you like.
I've still got my black box. There it is. Ran a little ring there. Right, everyone. Let's go for it then. The pattern challenge. Remember, it's 90's week, everyone. To make a pair of cargo pants. Now, Ryan, I don't know whether you know this, or Ting. I always called them combats. Do we know where the terminology changed, or how it went from cargo to combat, or combat to then cargo? Anyone?
I'm assuming they were known as combats because they originated from the war. That's where my knowledge takes me.
Right.
But I've always known them as cargo trousers. But maybe, like you said in the beginning, maybe that's because I'm younger. Like maybe that's why. But yeah, I think maybe that's where that comes from.
Okay.
But
I wouldn't know anything about them because I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole.
Oh. Were you not in that type? I think I thought you'd be, all leisurely or are you in something?
Not in cargo pants, darling. Nobody wouldn't be seen dead in cargo pants.
Not even like on your teacher training days when we could go in. I'm just trying to think what I used to do on my teacher training day. No, I suppose it was just jeans.
I have never owned a pair of cargo pants. They are unflattering, too baggy, and who wants a pocket that's down by your knee? Absolutely impractical.
Wonderful. Let us know in the comments, viewers, were you in a pair of cargo pants in the 90's or not? You weren't trying to be, who was it, Mel C? Or Eternal?
All Saints, wasn't it? With their Never Evers.
Yeah. So they had 4.5 hours. They said at the beginning this was their most complex pattern yet. I think, do they mean for that the first round? Because I thought the dressing gown last week was complex. I can't see how this was more complex.
That was very repetitive, the dragon,
Right.
making the things and then going sewing them in. This, you had the pockets and gussets and folds and pleats and hook and eyes and elastic and
I think with the trouser, I think the pocket was the most complicated part. And from just a technical point of view on the actual sewing, because if you take the pocket away, it really is just an elasticated trouser. It's not.
Yeah.
There's nothing complicated in terms of the construction. It is the pockets, and I think with the cargo trouser, because they're the main element, they are the thing that's going to stand out. So I think that's maybe why they focused on that a lot. Especially in the judging, I felt like they focused on the pockets. Of course, they made comments about the fly zippers and things, but the pockets really are the thing that stand out.
And it was a bellow pocket. Now, I've never made a bellow pocket compared to a normal pocket. It's just more fabric to sew, isn't there?
Yeah, it's literally kind of just like, I guess you'd call it a gusset that just goes on the side. It's definitely more complex in terms of seaming, but I think that is what made it a complex garment.
And some of them didn't get to completely finish, but they are. Let's take a look at them. Let's have a look at the group shot there. There's the 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see that we had 2 in the classic sort of camouflage, which I think I would have chosen if I was on there with the fabric, and then the solid colours. Now, this kind of yes, they all struggled with the pocket. Let's go to we'll quickly go through the list of them there. Let's look at Asma's first. She seemed to do really well, but Ryan, I don't know whether you can help me with this one. Patrick was going for it with his analysis, and if I have I got a picture, this one here. She got really good feedback, but the bit that Patrick said, which I didn't understand, all really good, but the side seam is a bit bouncy. Now, I have no idea what a bouncy seam would look like, or what he even means. Can you shed some light on that? Because that's her bouncy seam. I would think bouncy is like well, I'll draw it because I've got a pen, haven't I? Like wobbly. God. But I can't see that wobble. What do you think bouncy means?
Usually when a seam looks like that, because I made this point when I saw the made to measure with Vicky's dress, because the seam was very rippled, as I call it, like this. And that's usually either when you get tucks in the fabric, in the seam, or it's simply because it hasn't been pressed properly. So normally, if say you sew something and it looks like that, if you press it, you can kind of diffuse it and you can kind of steam them out.
So are we? But I'm going to try and focus. Is it this bit? Is this the bouncy bit?
Yeah, that's what he's referring to.
So if we were looking at it like side on, it would go down a bit and up a bit, down a bit and up a bit. And then flat.
Yeah, it kind of look rippled.
Yeah,
but from just looking at the seam, I can see it hasn't been pressed anyway.
Right.
So probably because she hasn't had time. Usually you press as you go whilst you're making something. But I think it's literally just down to the pressing. It doesn't look like any fabric's caught in there because they are so faint. And if it is, it's very minimal. It probably could have been pressed out visually. So in terms of construction, I think it was actually done pretty okay. It was mainly just the finishing that was kind of tipped it.
And I suppose, Ting, we've often talked about this, haven't we, Ting? If you're under pressure with time, what's going to go? You're probably not going to iron, are you, or press?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I hope you're making notes as you go along, because the profession has just told you should iron as you go.
Yeah.
That's where you need to make some notes as well.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because sometimes you think, "Oh, I'll do that later." Especially with patchwork, I'll just do a finger press, and
but you'll get the same problem with patchwork if you don't press as you go as well.
Yeah.
So, but it is a time issue here. It absolutely is a time issue here, because if you were doing it at home, we've always said you'd stop, go and make yourself a cup of tea.
Yeah.
You'd come back, and then you'd switch the iron on and give it a damn good press.
Yeah.
Pressing
I know.
can make or break a garment. 100%.
Right, I need to remember that too. Right, let's go on to the next one. Lauren, let's get rid of Mia. No, that's get my buttons. Right, now this made me really giggle because when Patrick was reviewing this one, she was missing a button. So she was one of a couple that didn't properly finish. But Patrick, bless him, he just went, "Oh, it just feels like you had to rush at the end." Like, no way, Patrick. You gave them 4.5 hours to do a complex pattern, so that they are all rushing. So I just thought that made me laugh. Don't know about you.
Yeah.
But they didn't get the button on. And then she had issues of rushing and putting. I think she did her top stitch on the zip, didn't she? A little bit too close, and then she had to do it again further away. I've not done a zip like that, especially with gentleman's garment with the fly guard. Do they call it? How difficult is that to do?
Guard. Yeah. Zippers. It depends what way you do it, because as you know, sewing, there's a million ways to do one thing. But personally, when I create fly zipper fronts, I'll press especially, but then I'll top stitch it as I go. So once I've put the zipper onto the guard, I'll top stitch it after, before I even add the crotch seams together. Then I'll do the little top stitch on the bottom of the seam at the end. That way you can do it when it's flat instead of waiting until you construct it all and then do it at the end, which can cause it to go kind of wonky. But obviously, like you said, everything's edited, so we can't really see the techniques that they're using, and we can't see the instructions as well as viewers. So it literally could have been a case of just doing it a different way, or she did just get the distance wrong, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think also Patrick was drawn to it because, and we've all done this, she knew she'd done it wrong, so she unpicked it. Then you can still see the line of stitching where the holes were. And so, again, I pressed it, put a bit of steam on it, you might have got rid of some of those holes, but you can see that it's on there. So he kind of zoomed in on it. If she'd managed to, get rid of those holes, then he wouldn't have known that she'd done it wrong in the first instance, because she corrected herself afterwards.
Yeah. I'd give her credit for that, because she recognised her mistake and then she went back and fixed it. Personally, I think that's better, and not getting it 100% finished than getting it finished and it being wrong, because you're still learning and you're still fixing the mistakes. So I give her credit for that. I didn't use her for it.
Let's go back to the group picture. We know Lizzie also struggled and Tony struggled with the untidy pocket. There's a lot of seams there. I think they had a lot of fray bits. Well, I say if you're under pressure, you're not going to cut those little sprouty bits out, are you? Of those threads where you've cut it on the machine. Lizzie with her camo, no buttons again, and the zip. Let's go to. I haven't got a close up of it for Lizzie, but it was the top of the zip. It wasn't right in the belt, and Patrick seemed to think that was it then makes the garment almost it struggles to be wearable or decent. So I think that all seemed to be a big thing that let her down there. But they all finished though, as in they were on the mannequin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't have, some of them weren't hemmed, some of them were pinned on. Lizzie's T-bar fastening was all over the shop. So yeah, there's finished and there's finished.
Vicky's, however, got a huge sort of love from the judges. Had everything there, all on and neat. And
I think,
of course,
that's where we started to kind of sit up and go, oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Because, as I said, in all the previous weeks, she's done okay, but she's never been one, where you thought, oh, she should have won this or she should have won that, where suddenly it was like, oh, this was someone who possibly was going home based on the last couple of weeks. And this first item that everyone else seemed to struggle on, she did really well on. And so then it was like, oh, actually, maybe Vicky has got something here.
Yeah, I feel like the past few weeks she kind of fell into the background. I didn't really know I didn't remember anything of her mix. But this week, like I said at the beginning, I was really surprised to see how actually well she can sew. She is technically good, and that did prove it this week in most of the challenges, I think.
So we had there's Vicky first, and then at the bottom there, Lizzie. Though I have to say, I felt it was quite close between Lizzie and Mia, because Mia also didn't have a hem and no button, and the issue with the fly guard. So I don't know how close those two were. Mia's is this one. Whether they were close or whether Lizzie's was even further at the bottom, I suppose we'll never know. But there we are. That's the standings of that round. Vicky coming first and Lizzie bottom. So let's go to the transformation challenge, where I think maybe a slipper or two was thrown. We've got with zero slippers so far, because that was an okay round. It fitted, 90s fashion, yes, okay with that. But this one, they had to, for the transformation challenge, use household textiles and turn them into a fancy dress outfit inspired. That word again. I know we've thrown a slipper or two at those inspired challenges in the past. Inspired by a 90s icon. And this is where I get on my high horse. Not to actually be the icon. So you go, it's just inspired by. But they got quite het up of, we've got to be able to recognise that icon as well.
Yeah.
And that's when the slipper went.
That's when you threw a slipper went. Yeah, me too, Ting. Right, slipper. Was that one slipper or two?
Just the one.
Okay. Go on, Tig. What did you think about that?
Well, I think, me and inspired don't get along very well, full stop. But when it kind of transpired, I don't even think halfway through, I think it was when they came out to do the judging, that they wanted to be able to look at the outfit and know who it was. I was just then like, well, how are you going to... Because, the whole inspired... If they'd have said it's got to be a girl group member or it's got to be... But Lizzie, who did the Prodigy one, it was inspired by the silhouette of the Prodigy and the colours and everything. And that made perfect sense if someone explained it to you.
Yeah.
It just seemed to be that it was a last-minute thing, that it was like, well, we've got to walk in here and know exactly who it was. And then also, when you look at those fabrics, the leopard print and the Union Jack, and possibly even the pink, although, Mia turned it into Madonna, they were going to be instantly recognisable. If you were left with the stuff he had, well, that wasn't instantly recognisable.
Yeah. And I went back to look at it, and I was like, what's Asma doing when she was choosing her fabrics, and actually had the Union flags already gone, had some of the things gone, and she was then left picking... Because the producers must have put certain fabrics there to go, right, if we put a Union flag in, someone's going to do, what's her name, Spice? Ginger Spice.
Jerry Halliwell.
Jerry Halliwell.
Yeah.
So they were obviously leading that way, and the same with the fabric for the cones. Let's put some strong structured fabric there in case someone does the Madonna Gaultier boob bra, the cone bra.
Yeah.
So they clearly wanted that, but it just got me really angry. And it's partly because, yes, I'm a Lizzie fan. I wanted Lizzie in the final. and she was being inspired, she said straight away, by Keith. But were you thinking, well, is Esme going to know Keith and Prodigy?
Well, I think, like you say... I think, like you say, with the fabrics, like the Union Jack, that's, like you say, is instantly recognisable. The same with the leopard print.
Yeah.
For me, I go straight to the Spice Girls with Mel B. And like the word inspired, again, it's not necessarily something you can look at and recognise straight away, because in a design perspective, that's not really inspired. That's kind of mimicking, because you're creating something that's you can recognise from something else, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Good point. Yeah. It's not inspired by. You're actually recreating an outfit. It's completely different, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think like the cone bra, everyone knows the Madonna and Jean Paul Gaultier cone bra. It's literally a pinpoint in fashion. So in a way, I feel like that was kind of a lucky escape, because everyone would recognise it anyway.
Yeah.
Whether it was made out of a bright yellow fabric or black fabric, everyone's going to know that that's a Madonna-inspired look. So yeah, I don't think it was inspired. I think they used that, but I really think the judges wanted something to mimic or reflect, so it's easier to recognise, which I think was kind of a disadvantage to them.
Absolutely.
I also felt that the Union Jack, you're not going to do anything other than Jerry with that, so they kind of knew what you were going to do with that, and you could have said the same a bit with the leopard print and Mel B inspires, you know. So to me, that was a bit too safe for Vicky and Tony, because all you had to do, I mean, I know they did it slightly differently with Vicky, the two-piece, and Tony was more like Jerry's actual dress, but what else were you going to do with that? No one else has ever worn a Union Jack, so it was never going to be any other character, and that would have actually frightened me off a bit.
Yeah. I think if they give them all just plain fabric, like I think if they give them all maybe a different color each, and it was completely plain, I think then it could have been more of an inspired challenge. But this is literally giving them something that someone's wore, and let's see if you can make it recognizable to this person that we already know of.
And let's go back. That's a good point, Ryan, because let's go back to the brief. The brief was to turn the household textiles into a fancy dress outfit. Well,
it just didn't make sense.
Is that the wrong wording? Should they have said, take the household textiles to turn them into a garment that a 90s icon would have worn? Would that have been a better brief?
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
I think so.
If that's what they wanted. Because are these... I suppose it depends on what you think of fancy dress. You go to a fancy dress party as a 90s icon, you're recreating a garment, which is what you were saying, Ryan, which is basically what the ones that won did. Whereas Asma was doing Jennifer Lopez, and she had in mind perhaps what she would wear and created something in the style of that. And the same with Lizzie. This not it's a fancy dress outfit inspired, and as she said, and as you said, Ting, the colours. So is that not a transformation fancy dress garment more than recreating a garment? I don't know. I think this will cause fury in the comments, I'm sure.
I don't know if it will, because I think what we've all come to agree is that the transformation challenge is rubbish. It doesn't matter what week it is. It doesn't matter what they're asking them to do. The judges are so inconsistent that you can't seem to win anyway.
Yeah, so I agree.
Go on.
I think the better transformation challenge this series so far was the art one. Art week. I think it's only because it was just fair. They all got given canvases, but so like you say, Ting, I think the transformation challenge isn't much. Like, I just don't find it inspiring. I just don't care for it in a way, which it probably sounds really bad. But like you say, the brief is, and to how they judge it, it's almost like they haven't read the brief themselves.
Yeah. You can let him keep talking because he agrees with me. That's fine.
Well, there we have it. So the ones that won were the ones that were pretty much obvious, as in a recreation to what the judges had in mind of that person wearing. You know, being, like you say, a fully representation rather than inspired by. So, yes. So Lauren first, Mia second, and at the other end, Asma and Lizzie fifth and sixth. So by this point, I'm now worrying, like we were last week. Ooh, right. Lizzie went from going first in the first round and second round to now losing pretty much the first and the second round. Oh dear. There we are. So into the made to measure, which is probably where we'll get most of our discussion. They had to create an outfit inspired by a 90s supermodel. And we all know what they were wearing in the 90s, supermodel-wise.
Those of us that were alive know what was they were wearing.
I went there. I've seen it. I went there.
So, Ting, did you have a famous Favourite supermodel of the time?
I wouldn't say I had a favourite supermodel. No, I mean there were so many of them. I think in
Yeah.
the 90s.
But
With your Liz Hurleys and your Claudia Schiffers and your
Naomi
Naomi
Campbell
Campbell and all. The 90s was the
yeah,
supermodel
was.
era. Now they don't have those supermodels that are in everyone's clothes in
Yeah.
everyone's shows like they used to back then. You were always tuning in to the news to see who was tripping out of the Groucho holding a sausage roll as they land in the gutter. They were news themselves,
Yeah.
let alone what they were wearing. So you can understand why this is the challenge and we know that Liz Hurley safety pin dress. We know all of the huge slits in the side and things like that. They're all things that we remember seeing from that period. So that's what we
Absolutely.
wanted to see here.
We did. We wanted
Yeah.
to see tight fitting, body con, as they call it, body conscious garments that just hugged the body. So made to measure. This was the round to make a perfect made to measure, wasn't it? So let's
Yeah.
go into it.
Oh, it happened.
Let's
It happened
change.
a bit this week, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got 6 to look at, 2 pictures each. So let's go through alphabetically because my machine has 8 buttons across, so I can fit the sewers in quite nicely now. So there we go. Asthma's one, which, well, it looks phenomenal.
It was the best.
Yeah.
It was.
Yes, she may have had an advantage because she said she has made bras before. She's done it for a long while because she said she can't remember the last time she bought a bra, I think she said. So, yes, that's...
Yeah, but that's what she sews. It's no different to having a grandma on there who sews her grandchildren clothes and coming first in Children's Week. It's just that's what she happens to sew.
Yeah. And to be fair, the only advantage she did have was with the bodice part. Like, she could have massively messed up on, any other part of the garment.
Yeah.
But of course, the bodice and the bust area is literally perfect. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And yeah, there's nothing more to say. It was just stunning what she created.
I was worried, Ryan, with the pleather because I thought that was just so difficult to sew with, and she'd done so much good work on the bodice that I was worried that when she was trying to put it around everywhere, and we all know what sewing machine needles are like, and it was just like, oh my god, is this where it's going to go wrong? Because everything else was been done so well, it was like, please don't mess this up at this stage, which she didn't, but that was the heart-stopping moment.
Yeah, it could have easily went wrong. Easily.
I don't know whether you noticed, but the drawing, that's the design there. Oh no, wrong button there. That's the design. Why do you think they never showed us the back? When the model came down the catwalk, she didn't do a turn. So I had to hunt for a very close picture of the back, and I only found it here when they had a side-on shot. Any thoughts, you two?
That's interesting, actually. That's a good point.
I think she was struggling, like I've just said, trying to sew, because she had to sew the buckles on, and we saw her doing a couple of those. So maybe it was just too much and she didn't get what she wanted. But then that's not fair in terms of judging because we only saw it from the front where it looked phanomenal. If it did look rubbish at the back, they should have...
That's the only little thing, and that's only because... Not because I wanted to see if it was wrong. I wanted to see the back because we do, don't we? When you see that garment and she's walking down, every other time they've done a twirl, haven't they? Or they do some sort of spin. Just didn't have that there, and I was like, oh, I want to see the back. Because it looks fabulous, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From the design, it looks really good. But like you say, like of course, when they edit it, it's only a 60-minute show. I guess they can kind of create a narrative if they wanted to. The back could have been a right mess, for all we know. But because the front was so perfect, maybe that's what they purely judged on, which is not fair.
Maybe the twirl got edited out. But yes, you're right. It was stunning. Right, next down the line then, we have Lauren. So let's get rid of that, and that, and that, and then Lauren. Lauren's was bamboo silk. Now, bamboo is like a viscose. What's viscose like to sew with, Ryan?
I've worked with
Or
bamboo before, actually. Yeah, I've worked with it. I've used it to. To be honest, I've personally find it quite easy to sew. I thought it was, it wasn't vicious in terms of how it's handled, or it wasn't hard to handle. But that's me. I actually did like this dress. I think it's well constructed, because it is so simple. It has to be perfect, as Patrick said. I think what would have made it better, though, is if she actually draped from the top of the bust, maybe not the neck. I think it would have been more flattering. And in terms of proportion, I think it would have looked much better.
Not had
but
that
again,
drape?
That's from my design.
Not had the drape there?
Yeah, I think if she brought it to like just to the top of the bust, so maybe you could have seen like the cleavage or anything. I think from a design point of view, it would have been much more flattering. Like if I personally designed that or made that dress, I'd have it from coming to the top of the bust. It just would have looked nicer. It would have looked much better.
Supermodel vibes from this?
No, I don't think so.
No, I mean, it was that thing of because we had this and Lizzie's was essentially the same pattern, and it to me it wasn't 90s supermodel. Going back to Asma's, it was the tight fitting, slinky type dresses with all the chains and everything that Mia tried to put on hers and everything. That was kind of the 90s. This to me wasn't that, and also it was a very simple dress, and I know Ryan will tell me it's not that simple, but it was simple compared to the others, and they made that comment of, if you're going to do something simple, it has to be perfect.
Absolutely.
Because they didn't have 500 pieces that they were trying to sew together, and that's where the little details, like Ryan has said, with the draping and everything, they make all the difference on a simple dress. But 90s supermodel didn't really scream at me.
Yeah, it felt. Go on.
Oh, I think they said she cut it on the bias, which I give her credit for, because it's not easy to sew a bias cut fabric, especially. But like Ting says, it's definitely not 90s inspired. It's kind of just a pretty dress. I wouldn't look at it and think 90s.
I thought it was a nice wedding dress. That's what I thought. If you're a guest at a wedding.
Guest, yeah.
But again, we've talked about this. How do you critique and mark an inspired by project? Because people can be inspired by the littlest things. So she could have been inspired by literally, well, 90s was about this tight fit. Well, she's created something that's a tight fit. Don't worry about it being black or gold or having more body flesh being revealed. She's taken one aspect. You can't mark her down for that, though, can you? Even though it's frustrating for us. It's hard to mark, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Right, let's go on to the next
one. What do you type into the internet? You find out that it's a 90s supermodel's dress. You've got to find a pattern. You can't just go, well, unless you're Ryan, who can design his own patterns, but you can't just go, oh, well, let me just whip one up. You're looking for something, and you're trying to say, well, is that 90s? Is that not? And then there's the pressure of actually needing to have a pattern, because you've probably got to send it in to be approved before the show even starts. So, there is an element of, you can only work with the patterns that are out there and commercially available.
Yeah, to me, that's just a bias cut slip dress. I think if it was lower down and I guess less body fitted, maybe if it just skimmed, it kind of looked like something like a 90 or something you just pull over. And
I don't know if, like you say, if it hit the floor, because if you, I know it's not exactly the same, but if you think Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman and the red dress went all the way down to the floor, and I think with the draping on the top and it hit the floor, maybe we would have felt a little bit more 90s.
It would have
with it.
elevated it a bit
fitted, and then flared out a bit at the bottom. But I think it needed to hit the floor, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe she was channeling, a Kate Moss feel, because I could perhaps see.
Yeah, but maybe maybe up here, but the minute
yeah,
it kind of left the bust area,
yeah,
it then became very pedestrian.
yeah. And let's go on to which was hard to watch. Lizzie.
Oh, is it your girlfriend?
um, it was interesting watching this in the edit because we weren't seeing much of her, were we? And it was like, is this either going to be stunning or really, really bad?
Well, I think if I remember correctly, you text that message going, "Oh, this is going to be stunning or really, really bad to me," and then she flung it over the model and it came down, and I just went back, "It's really bad."
Yeah. But there are so many 90s inspired, well, more, should I say, not so many, more 90s inspired compared to Lauren's. You've got that gold look, because
Yeah, but
that gold
look at the
liquid, that
fabric on
liquid
it.
gold was a big Versace thing,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
and Ryan
Yeah.
will agree with me in a moment, I'm sure. But this, but that fabric, I don't quite know what it was. We were debating on whether it was a lame or not. But
Yeah, I
on
think
that
it is.
previous
That's what I
picture,
said.
it just completely stuck to her body,
Yeah,
and then that took a lot of the shape out of it. If you
yeah,
go back to
Yeah.
that previous picture, it just it looks like
yeah.
she's wearing trousers, like a jumpsuit.
It's
It just
Yeah.
stuck to her, and that didn't help either.
it's like a vacuum, isn't it? It clings,
Yeah,
like suction.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
and
I
then
think where she went wrong was the fabric choice. I think it wasn't. I don't think it
yeah.
was that badly sewn. It was the fabric choice. I think it is a lame. As soon as I looked at it, I thought that's a lame fabric. I could be wrong, but I think it is. But no, it's definitely the fabric choice, I feel.
And it's stretched, isn't it? When she did the hem, and I think it's
yeah.
that metallic lame type thing. It's so easy to stretch when you're sewing it. And of course, you can't fix it after that. She chucked it back on the model, and of course, it hung there with the stretched hem. You can't do anything unless you're going to trim it up and start all over again. But she was out of time.
Yeah, because you could see the difference. If we go back to Lauren's, that fabric is just hanging, isn't it? Whereas poor old Lizzie's looks like it's, yeah, whether it's difficult to even walk in. But let's talk about her spaghetti straps. They were phenomenal, weren't they? Look at that.
Well,
How
you'll
hard
say
is
that
that to
Yeah,
do,
anyway.
they were
Ryan?
perfect.
Yeah? Of course.
Because spaghetti straps are difficult just because they're so small. But I think she did do a really good job. Again, I think it's down to with the rest of the dress. I think it was the fabric choice. But they were really good. There's nothing you can critique on them, I think, to be honest.
And if I've learned well from you, Ryan, are we right in saying we've got a, what did Patrick say again? What was his terminology? A bouncy seam? Is that same
Yeah,
thing again
bouncy
there?
seam. Yeah,
It's
judging
been
from that one
pressed one
again,
way and then it's been pressed the other way, or not been pressed at all.
in the middle there where your first arrow is, it looks like she's actually caught fabric.
Oh,
But again,
right.
it could be down to pressing.
Yeah.
Of course, I weren't there. We weren't there. So yeah, I don't know with that. I think it was just a really bad fabric choice. Because even some fabrics, even if you press them well or not, they're just not gonna work for you. And I think that was the situation.
Yeah. And we've often said
I
that could be fabric, could make or break it, can't it, Ting?
Yeah, I also didn't like the bodice. I think looking at Lauren's, where we had that drape, which seemed more 90s to me. Whereas, yeah, I mean that I quite liked the top because it was essentially the same dress from the bust down. But going back to Lizzie's, I just didn't think. Again, it was made to measure, and I didn't think it fit the bust very well. And then that
No.
also didn't help with the hang that then went from that bust seam or for the rest
Yeah.
of the dress. It just, to
Oh,
me, it looked more like, the top bit. It could have been like a nightie or a negligee type top, whereas Lawrence with the bit of drape just added a bit of interest to the top, I felt.
I think the top of Lizzie's there on the right hand side. It looks like there's too much fabric there. In
on
that
the,
Yeah.
panel. And I think that's what's causing it. Under the
there.
arm.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
there's
one. Yes, when
definitely.
we had the close up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there as well. On that right hand seam,
Yeah.
you can see there's just too much fabric. It's almost like it needs to have a dart in it. but again, I don't know if I'm not sure if they created the patterns for this or if they used commercial ones that they just altered.
I think it's a mixture of both. We have had people on the made to measure, haven't we, where they use they draft their own pattern. Most will use a commercial pattern, won't they?
But the thing is, and Ryan's right, it looks like it needs a dart on that side. But there's a seam there. That should have been gathered into that seam. It doesn't need a dart. It needs to be sewn properly. And that was the kind of issue we were starting to see come undone with Lizzie.
Yeah.
That should have been gathered into that seam. And she didn't do all of her French seams. She'd started off, and I know that's a time issue, and we've talked about French seams before. But if you start doing that, you've got to keep doing that, because that's exactly what they picked up on, that half the dress had a French seam and half didn't.
Oh, that was painful to watch that. And even she spotted it, I think, just before the time went. And she's like, oh no, I can see the seam there. And you were moaning about the time, and rightly so. In this edit, it was like, what did you say, 10 minutes left, and they still had half a garment to make, or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were doing the stupid time shouts again, weren't they? I mean, if you want to throw a slipper at that one, you can do. But, again, going, oh, you've got half an hour. And I think every single sewer had only got the front or the back panel of their dresses done. It's like, right, so they've had 4 hours and they've done one half of the dress. And apparently in the last 30 minutes, they're going to sew everything else together. It's ridiculous.
Okay, Mia, who was doing the Liz Hurley inspired, the black with the gold safety pins. She'd got the black and the gold jewellery there, and it seemed to come down to the fact that this would have been better had it have more gold stuff on it. And I think I agree there, don't you two?
Yeah, she'd run out of time. She needed to fill that out.
I think, but again, though, looking at this, I think the only thing that does give me 90s is the gold. And again, that's back to the Liz Hurley dress reference that we all know.
Yeah.
I think it just would have been a pretty velvet dress. So I think if she got all of it on, if she had more time, it would have looked much better. But yeah, it really was the chains that only give me the 90s reference. And that's because, like I said, we all know of the Liz Hurley dress and
Do you
Versace.
think then she should have chosen, Ryan, a different fabric rather than the velvet?
I think if she chose something maybe that was used more in the 90s, maybe something like, I would say something like Lauren's, but again, with the chains, it might not have worked. So maybe that was her thinking behind it. Maybe she needed something a bit more structured.
Velvet to me, I don't know what you think, Ting. Velvet to me often doesn't look glamorous. It looks classy, but it doesn't look showbiz.
Yeah,
and I have a feeling that it wasn't a velvet dress that Liz Hurley had. I've had a feeling it was more of a, not linen, but it was more of a cottony type dress that then
it wasn't
velvet. It wasn't velvet, I don't think, and therefore you needed the velvet for the weight if you were going to drape all those chains off, but she didn't get to put them all on. So you'd need another kind of heavy fabric to take all of the chains, but maybe that's what should have been thought about, and then she could have perhaps got the chains on a bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
And Tony Beanie with this scuba again. He likes his scuba, doesn't he? But look at that seam. What do you think about that seam, Ryan? Are you jealous of that?
I really liked his made to measure, actually. The seam going down the front is literally perfect. You can see he's taken his time and done that well. The only issue I've got with it really is just design. I just don't think it needed the long sleeves. And even if it did, personally, if I created that with the sleeves, I would have swapped them over, because it kind of gives that colour block effect more in a contrast, which I think looks more 90s. I think this looks more modern, to be honest. I just think it could have been done better to make it look more 90s.
Go on, Ting, what do you think?
I think it could have been backless. You could have lost the sleeves, as Ryan was saying, and then as she turned around, that it was more of an open back, so it was more of like a halter neck, because that was very 90s, and very solid at the front with the big, seam, and then it turned around and there was a bit more of an open back that might have, looked quite good as well.
Something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
more the shoulders showing. Basically.
Because
Yeah.
I think because, like we said, in the 90s, it was all bodycon and
Yeah.
showing your body. Where this is
Yeah.
very covered up. It's very hard to reference to the 90s with this dress, I think.
Yeah, I suppose it's the colour, or well, it's figure hugging inspired. But as we say, you can't. Whatever inspires them, it doesn't matter. It could just be one aspect, and that's what they go for. Go on, Ting.
It was one of those things where I looked at it and I just went, "Oh yeah, no, I totally get that as the 90s." And then I'd look at it while she was walking and going, "Oh, I don't know if it is the 90s." And I don't know if it was partly like we've just been saying that maybe we needed to see. To me, it verged towards the 80s power suit type vibe with the long sleeves. And I think that's why if they come off, that might have, made it a bit more. And I think, I get the black and gold. I know this is black and tan. That was very 80s itself. But I'm not saying it should have been neon or anything else like that. But it could have been lifted a bit more with the different colours, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
And then to finish off with a stunner, which it was. Let's get rid of that and that. Oh, I've got her again. There we go. Vicky. It was stunning. It was the construction in it is phenomenal. The architecture, 90s supermodel.
No,
who wants to argue that? Yeah, there we are. Yeah,
I struggled with the 90s element.
Yeah, I think if maybe instead of going for the fuller skirt, if she went for like the bodice is really fitted, so maybe if it was something more tight fitting, like a pencil skirt or something really figure hugging, I think it could have been a win. But that skirt just makes it look like a wedding, some sort of wedding
skirt.
thing.
Yeah, it's the skirt. I think
we've
seen that sort of top, even within Asma's design. With the bra type design that was there, but the skirt went out, and I felt for her because she said right at the start, "I've tried to find something for a plus size model." Vicky is a bit bigger than that, and her model again, very beautiful model, but she's a bit bigger than some of the other models, and that's fine. And she tried to justify that's what she was doing.
Yeah.
But then at the end, it didn't quite look 90s. It was a stunning dress, and it is a stunning dress. But that's where you then have to say, well, how much of the brief is carrying the weight here, and how much is it just that she did an exceptionally good piece of sewing?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like though, even because she's using a plus size model, whatever that actually means. I think even with a pen, like I say, something more fit in a pencil skirt still would have looked better in terms of the brief. I just don't get the decision behind the skirt. Even if it's a commercial pattern, you could have easily made that into a pencil skirt. So, but other than that, I think it was very successful in terms of the sewing.
Oh God, absolutely. And I could see this on the musical. Is it 6? It just reminded me of one of Henry VIII's wives in that. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, it does. It gives that kind of like old English, like the royal type of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. Thanks, everyone. Let's go on to Garment of the Week, which we now know. I think everyone knew straight away. It was even foreshadowed because they got that in there. Oh, don't think you've had Garment of the Week yet. And you can understand it. It's precision, as you rightly said when we first talked about it. You just said, "Yep, enough said. Move on."
It's stunning.
And then who went home? Not Asma, sadly. Lizzie. Oh dear. But that's why we love the show. You get your favourites, you get the ones you get attached to, you root them on, you watch each week to see them, and then they go. And there you are. That's why we love it, isn't it?
We've said it in the past, though, that you can have a bad week, and that's all it takes. And, Lizzie has, especially the last 2 or 3 weeks, she's done exceptionally well. To the extent, I think last week we were saying, possibly make it to the final 3. She just had a bad week.
Yeah.
And you can't have a bad week when there's only 6 of you there.
Yeah, exactly. It comes down to like literally splitting hairs at that point. And as you know, if you sew, a lot of things can go wrong. And like you say, the time pressures they're on as well. So it is inevitable that something will go wrong for one of them.
Every time I sew, everything seems to go wrong. So I have finished my shirt that I've made. Let's go onto this, and I'll show you that next week. I was inspired by Reduce, Reuse, Recycle Week, even though that was quite a few weeks ago, and finally turned a tablecloth into a shirt, so I'll be chuffed to show you that. How many weeks have we got left? Only 3, everyone. You can see there next week, week 8, quarter final with the 5 sewers left. Then week 9, the semi-final with 4, and then yes, as always, the final has 3 sewers, and we will see who wins. Oh well, it's been a pleasure. It's been lovely having you with us, Ryan. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, I have actually. It's been really good, like actually getting other people's opinions on it. Because normally it's just me in my room watching.
Do you know what? That's why people love Unpicked, because they get to talk about the craft that they love, and they get to talk about, I didn't know, I didn't like that, or I did like that. And it's great sharing those opinions, because we all have different tastes, don't we? Some people like certain things, some people don't. And it's nice to discuss that, regardless, in a positive, I think, and a fair way, as always, Ting, don't you think?
Of course, but of course, if Ryan wants to discuss it in a very unfair way, he needs to be on the WhatsApp group.
If you like what you're seeing behind Ryan there, he's in his sewing room, and one of your YouTube videos was you in your sewing room, wasn't it?
Yeah, most of them are. I also post a lot of my studio over on my Instagram, so a lot of people actually like to see it. I really enjoy seeing behind the scenes of it. I do have a studio tour as well on my YouTube channel, I think from last July, which people can watch if they want to see my studio in depth. So yeah, this is why I do everything. Everything's here.
I'm very jealous of it. Very jealous of it. I need one myself.
So
viewers, go on this. Hey,
you've got a whole shop.
Go into the description if you want to find more about Ryan. Otherwise, that's it from us. It's been a pleasure having you, Ryan. It's been lovely hearing all your opinions and having a professional with us. Though you agreed with Ting all the way through, I think.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Cheers, everyone, and see you next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.